Okay, it's Rabbit Snail's Film Talk yet again, and we are compiling the 100 greatest films ever made, at least the 100 greatest films in our opinion. And I suspect we're going to be slipping into a bit of black and white just for a moment. But to find out, let me introduce our special contributor for this week. It's the wonderful Phil Campbell, one half of the Hammer Runners. And Phil, what's our contribution for the 100 greatest?
Well, it is a black and white. Funny you should say that. It's a 1957 film called The Smallest Show on Earth.
Wow, what a great film. And an amazing cast.
A lovely film. Often thought to be an Ealing comedy because it has sort of certain
Yes.
references and sort of style to be an Ealing comedy, but in fact made at Shepperton, directed by Basil Dearden, and it has cast like Leslie Phillips, Peter Sellers in it, so you might start to think it was an Ealing comedy, but and the nature of the story is very, very similar to that. But no, it's a story. It features Virginia McKenna, Bill Travers playing a young married couple, which they were in real life anyway, so they're playing themselves. Yeah. They're struggling to make ends meet, and they suddenly get a letter one day saying that they've inherited something, they're not quite sure what, the property of some description, from a great uncle, which they've never really heard of. But Bill Travers sort of suddenly remembers, oh yes, I remember him, I was a wee boy sort of thing. Yeah. And they travel up to Loughborough, where there's a fictitious place called Loughborough up in the north somewhere, to find they've inherited a cinema, which they're very excited about. And they think when they're driving around, the taxi driver takes them around, they stop and they say, oh, this cinema is a grand cinema. It was actually Hammersmith Apollo, apparently. Hammersmith Odeon they used for the grand cinema. I say to the taxi driver, is this the only cinema in Loughborough? He says, oh yes, this is the only one really. He says, God, we've inherited this. So they think all the time they've got this wonderful cinema. They meet, Leslie Phillips plays the young solicitor who's handling their case, and presents them with all the things, saying, I'm afraid your great uncle didn't leave an awful lot, but he has left you the cinema. Oh, yes, we've seen it. And they say, what cinema did you think it was? And we saw it out there, called the Grand. He says, no, this is called the Bijou. And they said, what, the Bijou? But, well, it's closed. That's why the taxi driver said it's the only cinema that's really open is the Grand, but the Bijou's closed, and they've inherited we think it's now a wonderful cinema. To them, it's horrific. It's an old flea pit wedged between two railway bridges or a viaduct sort of thing. And they go, oh dear, it's not quite the inheritance they were hoping for. But Leslie Phillips' character actually is quite good. He plays it quite straight. I mean, he's still quite funny in his way, but it's none of this sort of hello. He's not lecturing after anybody for a change, which is quite nice. And he sort of says, well, we might as well have a look around. And the cinema is in a bit of a bad way. I say it's called the old flea pit in brackets. And they get there and the trains thunder past. But it has three members of staff. They have wonderful characters from Margaret Rutherford, who plays the cashier, Mrs. Vasakali, Peter Sellers, who plays Percy Quill, the projectionist. Peter Sellers is only 32, but playing a character who's about 50-odd. Plus, it's got Bernard Miles, who's actually playing a character only a little bit older than himself. He was 50. And his character, Old Tom, who is the caretaker, commissionaire, although he always moans he's never got a proper uniform. He gets very upset about that. And they're still employed or on the payroll. So they're stuck with the situation, Bill Travers and Virginia McKenna, what to do. And Leslie Phillips says, well, we did have an offer from the owner of the Grand, which is very close by. You can sort of see it through the windows, of £1,000. I said, well, that sounds good. He said, because he wants to knock it down and build a car park to get into his cinema. But, of course, as soon as they find that they've inherited this and that the owner of the Grand says, no, well, that was ages ago. Now I'm maybe not so interested. So he plays it very cool and says, I might offer you sort of $400 to $500 for it. And they go, well, that's no good. So they come up with this wheeze that if they pretend that they're going to open it again and try and become successful, it's competition for him and he might up his offer, basically. So they go through the whole process of saying, we're going to keep you on, etc., and they do it up a little bit, hoping that he's going to phone back with a bigger offer and go through the whole process. And then, unfortunately, Bernard Miles hears them talking about this plan, they're not really going to open it, and he lets it slip to the commissionaire at the Grand, who he happens to be having a drink with. And, of course, it gets back to the owner, and he says he won't up his offer at all, so they're forced, if you like, to actually open the cinema and run it and try and run it at the profit, which is so funny. I mean, Peter Sellers, bless him, he's got his two projectors, and because they're both next to the railway lines, every time a train goes past, he has to cling to the projector like this, and all the picture shakes around. And there's a great bit where they're showing a western when the train train draws up in the western and stops like that. They'll let an Indian scout or a carriage go across, and a train turns up the station at the same time. And because it's quiet in the cinema, you suddenly hear this, the train's going to platform 15, it's for London, coming through. They're going, what? And then when it starts, it goes woof, woof, and the whole cinema projection shucking around like this. It's just so funny. But they have great wheezes because they think, well, they have this film, because the film's all sort of delivered, and they seem to have them there all the time. And they show a sort of Sands of the Desert or something like that. It's all shot in the desert. And they run it. They've now had an idea to have ice creams and drinks, etc., because they go to the ground and realise that's what's missing.
Right.
And they come back.
Yes, I see.
And they think, right, we'll try that. Firstly, Virginia McKenna gets a job, and she can't handle all the cheeky sort of boys trying to take advantage of her. And June Cunningham, the actress, is playing this character called Marlene, who's can look after herself. And so Bill Travers gives her a job. So they've got the two of them now selling ice creams. And when they're running this film, people stuck in the desert, they're all watching it. Bernard Miles whacks up the heating. He's down in the basement, so it's getting hotter and hotter, and all the audience are sitting there like this, going hotter and hotter, and it's steaming. They're sweating away, and on screen the guys are crawling across the desert, going, oh, water, 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 and they time it just right, and so they go right now, and they stop. Intermission, they come out, ices, drinks. Of course, there's a stampede for them, and they work so successful. They hold the film over for another week, so they can keep doing
Wonderful.
This. All these sort of things.
And just the kind of tricks cinema owners would use.
Well, you think so when you're in a place like the Bijou. But it's got some lovely touches. They wander back late one night, and they find that the three of them are still there, and they creep in, and Margaret Rutherford's on the piano playing, and they're running a silent movie up there, and she's playing accompaniment to it.
Oh, how sweet.
And Bernard Miles is sitting there with his cat watching it again, and they go up to the projection room and say, Mr. Quill, what's going on? And he says, oh, these are the old, Peter said, these are the old movies. That's the way we used to run them in the old days.
What a great film, though, and a nice bit slice of history too.
Yeah, well, it is. It's a bit like a sort of video document. You know what I mean? Yeah, and particularly for younger people who don't realise how films run on projectors and how you have to have change reels and stuff like this and what it was like. And of course, nowadays, if somebody would try and get hold of it, they'd open it properly as a little cinema. You know, they'd convert it all. But it actually was a facade put up. The actual cinema didn't exist between these two railway lines in Kilburn, apparently.
8, 9, 10 out of 10?
I'll give it 9 out of 10. The only reason I won't give it 10 was they had a very frustrating bit where the projection goes wrong when Bill Travers has to take over because Peter Sellers gets drunk and he has to go in there and try and run the film because the film breaks as it does. And when he puts it back, it goes out of sync. And then the people are saying different lines to what they're actually coming over in the sound, which wouldn't happen. They did it in Singing in the Rain, when they're going, yes, 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 no, 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 because the voice is the same. But she's actually saying dialogue that the man's saying, and I thought that wouldn't happen. Technical fault there. But
See,
anyway.
that's your technical expertise.
Yeah, I know. Other people would think it was funny, but I just found that...
You industry professionals.
I know, sorry.
So Phil's saying 9 out of 10 for The Smallest Show on Earth. Great film, great cast, wonderful comedy, nice bit of black and white too. So if you agree with that, feel free to leave a message down below, or if you don't agree with it, leave a message anyway. But Phil, thank you very much. Great to see you. See you next time.
Yep.
Thank you.